An old, weary man, dressed in ragged clothes, stepped through the grand doors of the bank, dragging behind him a large sack. With a voice steady yet filled with an unshakable conviction, he declared, "This bank belongs to me." At first, the response was laughter. Light chuckles at first, then growing into full amusement. The few customers in the lobby exchanged smirks, and the security guards, dressed in their crisp uniforms, exchanged knowing glances. One of them, a tall, broad-shouldered man named Stephen, stepped forward, already prepared to escort the strange man outside. But everything changed in an instant. The moment the old man loosened his grip and let the sack drop to the gleaming marble floor, a heavy thud echoed through the space. The laughter died. Every smirk disappeared. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. The bank, which had been filled with dismissive murmurs just moments ago, fell into a stunned silence. But before we continue, make sure to like this video and subscribe. Your support means everything. The afternoon sun poured golden light over the quiet town of Rockview, a place where days passed without much excitement. The streets, lined with small shops and familiar faces, held an air of routine comfort. But that particular afternoon was different. It was a day that would become part of the town's history. The heavy doors of Chase Bank creaked as they swung open, revealing an elderly man whose presence alone seemed to shift the air in the room. He was dressed in a faded coat, the fabric worn thin by time. His shoulders were slightly hunched, yet there was something about the way he carried himself, something unwavering, something determined. Slung over one shoulder was a large sack, rough and stained, looking like it had been through decades of travel. Most of the people inside the bank barely noticed him at first. A teller glanced up briefly before returning to her work. A businessman checked his watch impatiently. A woman near the counter adjusted the strap of her handbag, hardly paying attention. The bank employees, dressed in pressed uniforms behind their polished counters, exchanged small, amused smiles. To them, he seemed like just another lost soul, someone who might ask for spare change rather than attempt to deposit any real amount of money. But then he lifted his head. Under the brim of his faded cap, his sharp, aged eyes gleamed with something unreadable. Was it determination? Hope? Defiance? And then he spoke. "I am the rightful owner of this bank." His voice, though quiet, carried a weight that cut through the air like a knife. For a moment no one reacted. Then, a small chuckle echoed in the room, quickly followed by another. A security guard shook his head, a smirk curling his lips. A bank teller turned to her colleague and whispered something under her breath, trying to suppress a grin. Even the branch manager, a neatly dressed man named Timothy Temp, let out an amused sigh. "Sir," Temp said, stepping forward with a polite but condescending smile, "I'm afraid that's not possible. Are you sure you don't need assistance?" The old man said nothing. He simply let the heavy sack slide from his shoulder and crash onto the floor with a resounding impact. The room tensed. The laughter stopped. Eyes widened. No one was prepared for what came next. As the sack was opened, its contents spilled across the pristine floor, and a collective gasp filled the air. What people expected to be nothing more than scraps or worthless junk turned out to be something much, much more shocking. Bundles of faded banknotes, thick stacks wrapped in old paper bands, poured out onto the marble surface. The bills were ancient, their edges yellowed with time, but what made them remarkable was the logo stamped on them, a logo that had not been used in over 50 years. A leather-bound ledger followed, its cover cracked with age, its pages filled with handwritten records. Temp stepped forward, peering at the documents with growing unease. His lips parted slightly, his brows furrowing. What is this?" he stammered. The old man smiled, but it wasn't a smile of joy. It was a knowing, patient smile. A smile that had been waiting for this very moment for decades. "Proof," he said simply. The ledger contained names, dates, and figures. Records that told the forgotten story of a man who had once been at the heart of this very institution. "I built this bank," the old man continued, his voice unwavering. "Before your father was even born, this was mine." The weight of his words settled like a heavy fog over the room. The security guard, Stephen, frowned but did not move closer. Even he, a man with no deep knowledge of banking, could tell that the documents in front of them were real. "That's impossible," Temp muttered, his hands trembling as he flipped through the brittle pages of the ledger. "Even if you had money from long ago, that doesn't mean you." The old man cut him off. "My name is in there." Temp froze. His fingers stopped on a specific entry, his eyes scanning the inked words with growing dread. There it was. Kirby. The name wasn't unfamiliar. It belonged to the original founder of Chase Bank. A name that had faded into history. A name that was supposed to belong to a man long dead. A hush fell over the bank. Customers who had once been indifferent now whispered amongst themselves. Employees who had previously dismissed the old man now exchanged uneasy glances. This can't be right," Temp said, his voice barely above a whisper. C.K. Kirby would be over 100 years old by now. The old man's eyes twinkled with something that looked almost like amusement. "And yet, here I am." The revelation sent shivers down the spines of everyone in the room. The very foundation of Chase Bank's history had been shaken in an instant. "I was betrayed," the old man went on, his tone sharp now, his fingers gripping the edge of the sack. "By my own business partner, John Williams. We built this bank together, but greed does terrible things to a man. He changed the paperwork, convinced the board I was unfit to run it, and just like that I was erased." A murmur rippled through the room. Temp's throat felt dry. "And now, you're back." The old man nodded. "Yes, and I'm here to reclaim what is mine." The room held its breath. Outside, the town of Rockview carried on as usual. Cars driving past, pedestrians walking by, completely unaware of the storm unfolding inside the bank. But inside, everything had changed. This was no longer just an old man telling a story. This was a reckoning. A truth that had been buried for decades had finally surfaced. And now, it demanded to be seen. What would happen next?